government, it is, it's heavy men. Have you found any, has there been any hurdles that you've had to overcome? Because I know I have. I mean, I've worked in government now for 10 years. And there's definitely a lot of meetings that we find ourselves in. There's a lot of men in the room. There's been some challenges that I've faced in being the only female sometimes in a large sea of men in the room. Have you ever run into any challenges like that? And how have you worked through that?
Well, I have to confess I had a little bit of pre-training for this in the law before coming to a very male-dominated arena of government. And that is, in Orange County, before we moved out here, I was a real estate and construction defect litigator. So you heard about the houses sliding off the hills in Anaheim Hills and along the coast in Dana Point and San Clemente. Well, our specialty was plaintiff's side, representing the homeowners in large group litigations where we had landslide and soil subsidence issues. And if you don't think that that's not a male-dominated world, I'm here to tell you it is. Because we're suing developers. We get cross complaints going on where all the subcontractors are being sucked in. And so I learned very early on as a young attorney who had an unbelievable mentor in the law. In fact, he's my father's age, and he moved out here to the Temecula Valley many years later and encouraged us to take a look. That's one of the reasons we started looking out here. But he was really an unbelievable mentor, and it was, you can do anything. The first thing he taught me is he said, Kelly, when you get into the courtroom or when you're in a negotiation, I want you to know men are going to interrupt you while you're speaking. Men will interrupt you, and it's just a culture and it's habit. This isn't dogging on men at all. But it's something very interesting. If you pay attention to it, you will see it. But he said men will interrupt you as you're talking to the judge and making your argument, as you're making your opening arguments. They will interrupt you, and you need to keep talking. Because women's habit is to stop talking and give deference to the male voice in the room. Now, that sounds kind of silly sometimes, but you know what? Watch. It's true. So what I have learned to do is, Your Honor, I'm here today to tell you that this person has breached the contract because, well, blah, 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 blah. Excuse me, I'm speaking, you will have your turn. And anyway, so you breach the contract and on we go. Do you see how powerful a small piece of advice like that is? So that training in construction defect litigation, being in ballrooms taking depositions, because we had 50 to 75 parties on a case, and we'd have 15 subcontractors, grading contractors, the architects, the builders. Those were big deals, and often I was the only woman in the room. So I had to learn how to put my big girl panties on real quick and stand up straight and go in there and run with those racehorses. So that was really great training for government because the dynamic was very similar in some high-level meetings, and I learned that you need to assert yourself because you have something to add that they don't want to miss, right? They don't want to miss. So,
Very good. Yeah. So it would seem that normally an attorney, a temporary judge, wouldn't be here for Coffee with an Entrepreneur because normally they wouldn't be innovative or entrepreneurial in their approach to things. But you've taken a much different approach to how you run your law practice, and you've instituted some very innovative like Smart Court, and talk a little bit about that and your branding on the mugs.
And what's going on here?
What's going on with the mugs?
Well, let's talk about the mugs for just a second. If you'd all pick up these mugs, and they're very froofy. I'm going to just tell you this right now, right? They're super froofy. And the men noticed, and I anticipated your objection, sir, right from the get-go. But men especially, I'm going to challenge you to take these mugs. They say shenanigans on there. They really say shenanigans. And what this is about is the concept that in business, if your business is male-dominated from your management and your leadership, and you don't have a female professional's voice on your team, you're missing out. I will tell you, give you an example. In city government, one of the things several of my colleagues, you know, the ones who weren't threatened by me, those guys, one of the things they said on a regular basis after time went on was, oh my gosh, we never realized what we're missing. Thank you, sir. We never realized what we were missing by not having a woman on the council or the female voice. Now, a lot of times in what I would call modern day feminism, not the what we call the hardcore, hard edge feminism, but we spend a lot of our time trying to say we are equals, right? And I believe that to a certain degree. But we are different, and I'm here to say, let's acknowledge that and celebrate the differences. If we had an all-female run business, I would say you need some muscle in your hustle. You need to have some men, because the genders bring a different experience and therefore a different lens and perspective to what's going on. Let me give you an example. I recall one time we were sitting on the dais in City Council, and we had a group, you know, we can see people who are lining up to do our the public speaking early on. And I noticed that there were some mamas sitting out there with these little girls who were like 6 and 7 years old. And I'm like, what the heck's going on here? Because that night we were discussing our capital improvement budget, our projects, our CIPs. Very exciting. Thousands of pages of financial reports printed sideways in Excel spreadsheets. Newsflash, most of us lawyers don't like stuff printed sideways in Excel spreadsheets. If you can't give me an executive summary in words, I'm having a hard time with it, right? So we're discussing this very exciting CIP, the capital improvement projects for the city. And when that item came on, we had the request to speak from these women. And they come up and they've got the little girls with them, and then I noticed they're wearing softball jerseys or shirts or whatever, their uniforms. And this is what they said. Our softball, girls softball, plays in this sports park, and like Corona, I'm sure there's hundreds of parks, right? And the sports programs are very high on everybody's agendas. We want something for the kids to do. But this particular park where these girls played was the least attended to, the least maintained park and softball field and baseball field. And the boys who had the majority of the teams in town, most of those teams were at the better maintained parks. Okay, so that doesn't seem like any big deal, right? These mothers went on to say, we would like to see, we don't expect a lot of money, but we would like to see some of the money. Please pay attention to this park. Our kids are turning their ankles. There's, you know, potholes and divots in the field. And by the way, look at the state of the bathrooms. Okay, so I'm not telling you anything that's, you know, monumental on the business side, but I want you to hear what happened. Up on the slide projector goes these photographs of the bathrooms at this park. And it was deplorable. No toilet seats on the toilets. Okay? And I'm watching my colleagues, and it's like, I'm wondering if they're getting what I'm getting here. No toilet seats. Half of them had no doors. The lights were out. They were filthy. Ladies and gentlemen, how many of you would send your 6-year-old little girl into a bathroom like that? And yet, the bathrooms and the condition of the fields at the other parks, because they had the higher level boys teams, were being maintained. And so I heard my colleagues, I just sat back and waited, right? And I wanted to hear what they had to say. And it was, you know, it was the norm. Well, you know, we have to prioritize, and we have a lot more play at these fields and this, that, and the other, and blah, blah, blah. Finally, and if you watch city councils, good councils will go and ask each one. The mayor will say, okay, you know, Mr. Jones, Ms. Smith, Ms. Bennett, do you have something to add? I said, I sure do. Haven't we decided as a city council that we want to invest in young girls in learning that, you know, encouraging them that they can learn the math and the science and they can compete in this community as much as the boys? Yes. What value message are we sending to these little girls right here when we can't give them a safe bathroom at their park, when we are giving them the least attention to the field that they have been assigned? What is the value to young women in this community? And they looked at me like, and I could almost see the light bulbs going on over their heads. This is one tiny little example, but the voice of the female experience in your business and in your government is so important. And sometimes we're a little irreverent, and sometimes we're playful and fun. At my office, we call it she-nanigans. So that's what you've got on your mugs. We really promote this idea of she-nanigans. It's what we can add. It's what the piece is that's missing out of your business. If you don't have the female executive voice in your business, I want to challenge you. So men, take those mugs home and give them to somebody who you think could be a powerful voice and some woman that you want to encourage to come up in her profession or add to yours. By the way, just for some fun, you'll find that there's a little bit of candy inside, and of course they are sharks. Sorry. Yes. What was the question?
So,